Hello. Well, that was a wonderful introduction. It was very strange to see everybody's faces in person. This is the first time that we've actually all met despite spending a very long time together. I just wanted to start by saying I'm incredibly proud to have been even the smallest part of this process. It is one of the most rewarding, inspiring, fantastic things I've ever been a part of. I'm not here on the defensive. I don't believe it needs to be defended. It has been an astonishing privilege to be part of it, and the projects that have come out of it are going to shape the UK and our creative community forever. So I did just want to start by saying that. But welcome to facilitating a free-for-all, which is my favourite title, inside the Creative Studio R&D Lab. I'm going to welcome my participants on stage, Dev, Angel, and Angela, if you want to come up. So we're going to basically chat through our 6-week creative studio process, which was a really unprecedented form of R&D. And I think, as has been discussed today, it wasn't the first to do any one of its individual aspects. It wasn't the first to bring together teams that were new to each other or interdisciplinary. It wasn't the first to have a dedicated period of time that looked at, working on a project and coming up with an idea rather than arriving with one. But what it did do was bring all of it together in a way that was unprecedented, particularly with the scale of the budgets and of the projects. So we've got 3 participants here. I think it's going to be really exciting to hear from people who were inside the process, who can talk to you a little bit about why it was such an excited and unprecedented. I'm using this word a lot, and I know we've heard it a lot over the last 2 years, so that's the last time I'll say it, project. And I'm going to get you to all introduce yourselves. So Dev, I'll start with you.
Hi, my name's Dev Joshi. I'm the technical director of the Dreamachine project. I come from a place of doing technology and contemporary art, and have had the great pleasure of being a part of this process and then the ongoing process of delivering Dreamachine as part of the Unbox program. And now it's now.
Angela.
I'm Angela Chan. I'm head of inclusion on StoryTrails. I left a big job in television as head of creative diversity at Channel 4 to do a quiet PhD. And James Bennett, the director of the StoryFutures cluster, said, "Can you just help us out with this little thing?" And here we are 2 years later. And I'm proud that I did that, and I think it allowed us to really do the sort of work that we wanted to do.
Absolutely. And Angel.
Yeah, I'm Angel. I manage the digital platforms at Stemettes, and I joined About Us when I was 20, doing the R&D process, and here I am now.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to take a look at some of the projects that you worked on just to give people an idea of them. Angel, we'll start with your presentation.
Amazing. Do we have the video?
I think we should have. We'll sit here awkwardly and wait for it to appear. But yes, I believe it should be coming up for you. Is that right?
Oh,
this is Dev's project. So perhaps we're starting with Dev?
Cool.
Well, Dev, we're starting with you.
Excellent.
Bringing together this incredible team of extraordinary minds, all coming from different backgrounds with different expertise, to co-build and design and develop this project has been amazing.
One of the great joys of the Dreamachine project is that the scientific and the philosophical aspects have been built into the project from the very beginning. We're investigating a phenomenon that's still not widely understood, how flickering light generates this kaleidoscopic, vivid, immersive range of experiences for people.
So we're really making something that is internal and quite transcendental and personal into a collective experience. Because of the nature of the experience, we're hoping that what will really happen is that it will engender conversation. And so every stage of the Dreamachine has been designed in a way to really enable people to talk to each other.
This particular project is unlike anything because your eyes are closed and your brain is creating the visual. It's the first time I've actually composed something specifically to be played in a 360-dimensional sound. So that's allowed me to do much more than I've ever done. There are more sounds in there than I would put in a stereo track. So it's a little bit like moving from black and white to colour.
The technology had to hide itself away and simply become a way of communication. I, from my side, was very, hugely intrigued by the possibilities of the Dreamachine. I was deeply impressed by the scale and the scope and the remit. We loved working in areas where no one's sort of trodden before.
For me, seeing the responses of participants when they come out the other side of the curtain and they've just had this experience and they look to each other or they look at us. It's just so rare and so magical that someone can have that surprise in their life and that you can share in that moment.
Being inside this thing is kind of magic. It completely sort of envelops you. It saw the entire universe go by behind my own closed eyes.
I saw colours that I haven't seen for years, vibrant, powerful, passionate colours. It was just absolutely, I found the whole experience absolutely fascinating.
I'd recommend it to anyone, regardless of their age, because they could get the same feeling.
Fantastic. Now, is there anything you want to add to that, or did that say everything?
I think is that on? Are we on? I think that covers everything, yeah.
Yeah. That's a really beautiful reflection on it, actually. So we were chatting earlier, weren't we, Angel, about how strange it is to have gone through this whole process, seen the essentially dream, which is a strange word to use yours, of what these were going to look like, and then see them realised like that. So next up, we've got Angel. We do actually have Angel this time.
Amazing. Yep, so I will let the video introduce it and then perhaps I can talk a bit about it.
Perfect. All right, we're doing the awkward video wait again. Let's do it. Perfect.
About Us will probably begin in 2 minutes.
But then again, as Einstein said, the distinction between past, present and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion.
So how certain can we be? Anyway, the show is hopefully about to begin.
Gobeithio. And in the beginning, friends, there was nothing. Doedd na ddim byd. Friends, in the beginning, there wasn't even nothing. Dim byd.
Shortly after the beginning, it is generally agreed there was light.
But we're getting ahead of ourselves, if that's even possible. Here's a story.
But it isn't a story about the universe, or science, or history.
It's a story about us lot, and how we came to be here.
It's a story about all of us. It's our origin story.
Take a look at the people around you. That fella in the hat.
Yr hogyn na yn sbïo ar ei ffôn.
That couple over there.
We are all related. We came from the same place. And now, we are here. Ond dim am hir, dim am byth. Not forever.
You see, we are little more than temporary constellations of atoms and molecules born in the Big Bang, scattered across the universe,
and gathered together for a brief but magical moment.
The iron in our blood,
the calcium in our bones,
the oxygen in our lungs,
were all forged in the hearts of long dead stars.
Ni ydi y bydysawd.
We are not in the universe.
We are the universe.
That's a really wonderful taste of it, isn't it? It's really spellbinding. Tell us a little bit more.
Is this on?
Are we on?
Okay, just let that horrible
Something's on, yeah.
Yeah, so the video did sum it up really nicely, but just to cover all bases, it was a beautiful multimedia installation across 5 buildings in Paisley, Derry, Luton, Carnarvon and Hull, and it combined code that Year 5 students had done, poetry from young people, and beautiful projections also.
It was absolutely fantastic. I adored this project. Angela, on to you for another really fantastic presentation.
Well, I realise I've made my life much more difficult by not bringing a film, so here goes. So 2 years ago, we started on this thing. We said, should we pitch this all right? And so let me start from the beginning. I'm not going to tell you everything about StoryTrails, because if you were here yesterday, you will have seen our wonderful creative practitioners from Sheffield presenting on it. If you weren't, you can have a look at the back. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the process and how we got there, as well as what it was. So StoryTrails is this unique, immersive experience which allowed local people to see their towns in a completely different way through the magic of augmented and virtual reality. And I suspect in this crowd I don't need to explain what those things are. And it set out to tell the untold stories of those communities that it toured to through the magic of all these different immersive technologies. We wanted it to be a smorgasbord of technology that maybe you've never tried before. And it all started in your local library. And the aim was, our libraries are often the first place that we access new technology, and it's a really safe and inclusive space. So I want to tell you a little bit about our process. And it was run by StoryFutures at Royal Holloway, as I mentioned, and NFTS, and we were the Creative Cluster Programme. So we had quite a lot of experience of working with partners across the sector. And we knew that the BFI were up for it. So to an extent, we sort of knew what this was before. We had their amazing film archive. The BBC came on board to help us with that as well. A really key partner was the Reading Agency. And if you don't know them, take a look at their website. They are amazing. And they've got not only a relationship with libraries, but with readers. So we did a lot of testing in the early phases with armies of volunteers who would turn up to tell us what they thought we should and shouldn't do, and to see if they were excited by our ideas. David Olusoga came on board, and in the middle of all that festival of Brexit storm, that gave us great comfort. If David Olusoga is willing to stand up behind this project, we all are too. We worked with Nexus Studios, who are one of the leading augmented reality companies, and they brought Niantic on board, who make Pokemon Go. And it was a really important part of it for us because we were really testing Niantic's new technology. They were interested because we could make new waypoints for them. But this was like so on the bleeding edge of technology that we were falling off sometimes, right up to delivery. It was pretty scary. For me, one of the reasons I really wanted to get involved was that we set out to find 50 diverse creatives to upskill from everything from community theatre to podcasting. People with radio skills were so important to us, TV producers. You could come from almost any background if you knew how to tell stories. And it's the first project I've been involved in when we haven't said, what are your diverse protected characteristics, but what are the stories you want to tell? So it wasn't exclusively diverse at all, but it did attract a really diverse range of candidates. And we spent about 3 months doing deep work in communities to make sure that everybody who could apply had heard from it, because we needed a lot of them to have a strong connection to the 15 places that we were going to be in. Oh, yes, this. So the creative studio process, which I know we're going to go on to talk about, I thought, let's make it creative. So I'm sitting in my art studio, and I've made some notes and some drawings, and I'm going to share with you my bad drawings. Niall Rogers did an amazing session for us that you chaired, didn't you?
Yeah.
And he really led me to the attitude that we needed to come in from. And this is the quote I love. I can't see it on that screen. I'd be the first person to get killed in a horror movie. I'm so inquisitive. I have to open the closed door. And this was the spirit that I think we all wandered into Unboxed with. That, you're like, I don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to be fun. Oh, look, I put facility effects on it. Oliver Dowden, remember him? 3 culture ministers ago. He was the next up. And in gold were his statements, but I thought it was more interesting to capture some of the questions. I don't know if you can read my handwriting, but what came out from that session for me was a lot of us, this was at the stage where there were 30 teams beginning the R&D process, a lot of us felt very ambivalent about a lot of the press around it. We knew we had projects we really wanted to make and that were important to share with communities across the country. But, we had lots of questions. Are we going to be able to decolonize history? This is as Colston statue is coming down. What is this going to be like in this political climate? It was a challenge, and a lot of people felt uncomfortable about that. But we powered through. Sam, This is just for fun. You had a longer beard in those days. But Sam really set the tone for us. And actually, this brief to be open, original, and optimistic, at first you think, well, they're easy words to say. But actually, as you set out with that opener brief, with those 7 partners, it's probably the first time you've ever had to tackle something so wide open that you could literally do anything. And that tone, I think, really travelled through every team all the way to delivery. So we were left with 3 months to get on with it and have the idea. I think I'm just going to take you up to our pitch video. Have I got time?
Yeah.
And so this is what we came up with, pitched on the day. This is what they did to us on the pitch day. I actually thought you'd all met, guys, because you went full Britain's Got Talent, but I see now that you're all different sizes and you're actually in separate rooms. I won't say who was who on the panel, but Martin Green was born to play Simon Cowell. And here is what we picked. More slides, but I think I'm going to save them, like if there's a chance to show them.
Yeah.
Just talking to the Wizard of Oz people at the back. That's probably enough for now. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, I feel like that was a really perfect introduction to kind of the scale, the ambition, the creativity of these projects, and also I think the legacy that they're going to leave behind. I think it's very clear what these projects did for the communities that they went into. So let's talk the R&D process. I think that was actually a really great introduction to how it felt to be part of it. It was lots of creativity. It was kind of 6 weeks of collaborative coming together for the teams, lectures, seminars. We sat down with interesting people, interviewed them to glean insights. And it was just really exciting to be a part of. So Angela, I'll come back to you because obviously you had some really great notes there from it. How different was this process to your usual working process?
So I come from TV where people, and usually from the broadcaster side, where people come with a beautiful pitch and a sexy reel, and you sort of go yes or no, or maybe like let's change it up a bit. But this was like nothing else. For a start, you've got 7 partners, all with different working processes. And you sort of think within the creative industries, I assumed we all had similar development processes, but we really didn't. And the hard thing about that process was, even though we'd worked with a lot of these people before, everyone had a different idea of how they were going to get there, and everyone had different timelines. And like, you know, for instance, with Nexus, you can't make it till you've made it. So it was amazing to make a trail that sort of said we know what this is before we've actually done it. But it took us right up until the pitch that we realised Nexus, who made the augmented reality, weren't actually going to sort of make a little bit. They do it all through drawings, right up to the end. It was like, oh, we're going to pitch line drawings, are we? Okay. But it took a while, and everyone, rather than fighting for error, everyone was quite polite, and it took a while to just find our level, I think, and learn to work together.
Angel, for you, as you said, you were 20 when you joined this process. I assume you hadn't had a lot of experience on working on, you know, work like this, such collaborative projects. So tell me a little bit about what it was like for you.
So yeah, absolutely not. I had no experience. When I joined, I jumped straight out of university, joined Stemettes, and they said, we have this project for you if you want to get on board. I was like, yeah, I assume this is normally what businesses do. Wrong. Nobody at Stemettes had ever seen anything like this before either. And I mean, it was such a great experience because I'm not sure if there's anybody else around my age here or my age when I joined, but everyone can reflect on what it's like being a young professional and wanting to, you know, get your name out there, meet people, network with big names, and come up with big ideas. And that's exactly what Unboxed was for me, especially in the early stages. And I think because it was so new for everybody else as well, I didn't feel so scared sort of putting ideas forward because everybody was sort of as in the dark as I was, and it didn't feel like, you know, I was the young person there.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I think that's really rewarding to hear, because I think that was always one of the goals, was that we often say no stupid ideas in a room, but actually, how often does it really feel like that?
Exactly.
And so it's lovely to hear that really, that collaborative, completely safe, experimental atmosphere was created there. Dev, for you, how different was it from your process? Because you're quite technological, aren't you?
Yeah, I come from a place where technology is the means to an end of producing work. But I think the R&D studio and the Unboxed process overall is, in the moment of it, it was chaos. Like, it was happening incredibly quickly, and it was a lot of fun. And on reflection, actually like a little bit scary, because it was this thing of like, well, you can do what you want. Yeah, but no, you can do what you want. No one gets to do what they want. But it was also very supportive of like, well, you can do what you want, and here's all of these resources and all of these people. And it was just like, what's the catch? No, go, off you go. Off you pop. And this Miles Rogers is going to turn up, and this thing's going to happen, and then you have to do a report, and we'll present it, and all, and there's the panel that you showed. And that was like nothing I've ever been involved with, and a real privilege. I think the thing about it as well that was interesting, and we were talking about this before, actually, on a call, was that it was also a competition, because there's 30 teams, right, as part of this process, and we had a little speed dating and got to meet each other and do stuff, and that was great. But there was also this really interesting air of only 10 people are gonna, not 10 people, 10 teams are gonna make the cut at one point or another. So that, I think, was really important to providing a focus and a drive to you can do whatever you want, because otherwise there'd have been a lot of potential kind of meandering around. And that has never happened to me. Because people do competitions all the time, right? Like the whole of creative industry is about competition in some form or another. You've got to pitch something. Pitching is competition, because you're pitching against someone else, or at least pitching to someone who's going to make a judgment call, and competition is a judgment call in that way. And so I think that was the thing that really bound, because you're right, that there's the creative process or the delivery and development process that we all go through is actually very different from sector to sector to sector and practice to practice to practice. But that's the thing that binds us, is that knowing that we've got a deadline and a thing to show someone. Very rewarding.
Angel, you touched a little on what you'd hope to get out of specifically the creative studio R&D process. Dev, what would you say entering into it? What were you hoping to take away? What were you hoping to get from it?
I think an opportunity to do something different, but also the opportunity to really, Unboxed and F22 at the time was about it being open and optimistic, but that being this is what I wanted to test, right? It was okay, it's open and it's optimistic and it's all these things. Is it actually those things? It was open. It was open to listen to things that were kind of bonkers, and that doesn't happen very often either. And so I think I got out of it, that's what I wanted, was to test and see if that was true, and it is, and so that's great. Yeah.
Angela, for you, again, you've talked about how different it was from some of the work that you've done previously, your previous kind of career in television. So I guess same question to you, what were you hoping to get out of it, and did you feel that you did at the end of the process?
As a team or me personally?
I think you personally.
I've run a lot of schemes and, in the TV industry, and some of them are good in the moment. They do help people's careers, but we're moving into a new phase, and I think immersive is really exciting because, and I think a lot of diverse creatives see it as exciting because the future isn't set yet, the hierarchies aren't quite set yet, and the format isn't quite set. So I think what was really exciting for me was the idea that we would bring in everyone from practitioners from the community to people from more traditional parts of the industry and mix them all up and see what happened. And, in a way, some of the things that were difficult about the project were also because of that, because everyone was coming from a different level of understanding with different skills, and we were trying to create something uniform across 15 cities. But what was really exciting, actually, is, quite a lot of them are here today. There's Emma from Lincoln. We're seeing people come together and start to share those experiences and share those skills. And, it was very sad that we had to do all our training online at like a moment's notice because of the second lockdown. But, you know, the journey as they've gone along, it's been great to see people start to work together, and now as we've finished, starting to collaborate and, you know, share knowledge. So that was what I was in it for, really. And the tech is just a means to get there.
Well, it leads really nicely onto my next question, which is a kind of little look at the practicalities of this process, in particular working in the teams that you created. Because obviously, again, this was a very unusual process. We saw teams created around the idea of working with people you'd never worked with before, finding, you know, underrepresented voices, finding, you know, a range of disciplines. So of course, we had science, technology, engineering, arts, mathematics. You had to represent all of those in your team. And obviously, that's a very unusual way of bringing a team together. So Angela, I'll come back to you. What was the practicalities of brainstorming, of ideation, of, you know, coming up with a work that, as Dev has said, was essentially limitless? There was, you know, very little structure, very little framework to it. How do you do that as a group, particularly a group that, you know, by design has not worked together before?
In a way, I think that some parts of that were easy for us because we knew we had this archive, we knew we wanted to make augmented reality trails, but what was going to happen around that was fuzzy. So we knew we were going to make 10 VR projects, and that actually always sat as a slightly separate thing because they were national projects using the BFI archive, and those creatives were embedded with the VR companies making the work. The creative practitioners who were in location making the work, again, the AR trails had a sort of separate track. They needed to find their stories quite quickly. We needed to set some parameters and inclusive parameters for those trails. So a lot of the stuff around the trail was about the challenge of telling those stories with a really limited set of constraints, you know, about 4 stops, 4 minutes apart. They had to start from the library. It had to be a story about place, in that place, 4 minutes away from each other. And still it was like challenging. We couldn't do the whole trail on the days when we were showing because it was just too far. But the third part was the really challenging bit for us because, and I think we got a bit overwhelmed by the technology. So the third element was this, what ended up as an immersive cinema. And it was a giant cycloramic screen, 6 meters wide, a few meters high. And the job of this third set of creatives was to go and use 3D scanning to scan people and places in the community using your iPhone. And the technology was really quite good. And then our amazing animators put it together in some of the things that you saw there. But we didn't really know what to do with that. In fact, I don't know if the chaps behind the screen are able to put my slides back up, but I'll give you an example. So we really struggled because there was too much technology. We had an opportunity to use so this is the screen and how it looks in the sort of final iteration. We had a chance to use these really high-end scanners, which are extremely fancy, very expensive, very hard to take out to communities, to 15 cities, but they do a very faithful rendition, and what you end up is with sort of bodiless heads, which are faithfully rendered. And at first, I think we'd gone for we tried, are we going to do a spaceship that arrives? Are we going to do a totem pole outside the library with heads? And then when you think about totem poles, you think, actually, that's really inappropriate. And also, don't forget that this 3D technology is scanning technology, and that has a connotation for certain communities, and we just couldn't quite land it. And every diverse person was like, you're going to do what? It's rather anthropological. So we ended up with this idea of emotional mapping, that we were going to try and make new maps. So rather than, if you think about Google and Apple Maps, that's not really a representation of your world. The real world that you live in is this emotional map of the places and the people that are important to you in your locale. But we had to go up to Glasgow to see the guys from ISO Design to really talk about this because we couldn't solve it. We were very inspired by this artist's renditions of protesters during Black Lives Matter that were made on iPhones using 3D scanning. And so we ended up with 8,000 scans, this kit of parts that goes together, and gradually world building to make these different cities like you've never seen them before. You can see them on the iPads. I don't really want that. I'm just going to leave it running because it's quiet. But you end up with these incredible worlds, like the place, this is Lincoln as you'd never seen it before. It may or may not play, I'll leave it. But, having technology in the way was sometimes the challenge to the storytelling, is what I'm getting at. We had to sometimes get past the technology and say, what is really going to tell the story, engage the community and play it back to them.
Angel, of course, your project was all about technology and storytelling. It was, code and very traditional storytelling coming together. And, this is, as I said, this is a project that for me, I'm a computer science student, I'm a poet, so I've always, from the beginning, loved the potential of this one. How, as a group again, how did you come together to reach this? How did you know this was the right decision as a group when, of course, you don't have that trust yet, you don't know each other, you haven't worked together before? Talk me through the process of arriving there and thinking, do you know what, we've nailed it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not sure if, I won't go into too much detail about us, but it was made up of Stemettes, who are obviously a tech company, Poetry Society, who do poetry, and then 59, who do projections. And I think everyone who worked for each place was very passionate about what they do. And I think when you're very passionate about what you do and what you believe in, that is the only thing that you want to talk about and the only thing that matters. So everyone's putting their ideas forward, and everyone's idea is the most important. We were all quickly humbled when we spoke to other people, and they were like, but where do we come into this? Like, where do we put poetry into this? Where do we put code into this? So I think it was all very much that we all had to take the leap of faith together to create something that did include us all and also got the message across. But like I said, in the early stages, especially on Zoom, quite difficult when everybody's thinking that their ideas are the most important and the best thing to ever come out of anything ever. So, yeah.
I mean, Dev, I'd bring that to you. How do you, we've kind of chatted before about how this is a very self-selecting group. It invites people who are excited to work in this collaborative nature, who do work well without, that very kind of formalized structure and boundaries. But of course, what it does is also invites ego. I'm sure we've all got ego. We all believe in what we do. We all, are excited to bring our ideas and our expertise to the forefront. So in a group like this, where everybody is brought together because of their expertise in what they do, how do you set that aside and make sure you are truly working collaboratively?
It's a really good question. It's because this thing, when everybody is an expert, nobody is wrong. I mean, and I'm not being weird about that. Like, it's true. Like, experts are, by definition, probably correct about the thing they're talking about, you hope. But this means that you can occasionally end up in this place of tension because a solution doesn't just sort of appear on the table. And so the thing that we had to come to, and it's not even that we had to try to do it, it sort of happened naturally, which is also the thing about working with experts and professionals and people who are really at the top of their game, is that, like, they understand the boundaries of what their understanding is. And that we really, really quickly came to the realization that we all have no idea what this thing is. And, like, so you got a bunch of experts, a bunch of creative professionals, people who really, really know what they're doing, and we're all standing around this thing, and it's a bit like, oh, this is outside of everybody's comfort zone. And so in that moment of, like, nobody is an expert. And so you have to, put your ego away and be humble. And I think for us, it was very lucky. This all happened quite naturally through and it's difficult over Zoom and all the things. But that figuratively standing around this concept and being like, oh, yeah, I have no idea, actually. And then the first person says it, and then someone else says it, and they're like, okay, we all have no idea what we're going to do. And then that's the beginning of that beautiful kind of unpick, And it's this thing as well, I think, that like, expertise leads to situations where there's a tendency to want to cut the Gordian knot. It's just like, oh, we'll just do that and sort it out and be done. But the thing that bound us, like, I think what's been really, really bound, like, our project director, Jen, who's out there somewhere, has this incredible ability to really make you tease it out and undo the knot of the thing to find out what is in the middle, rather than just being like, we'll do that and it'll be fine. And having the patience and constitution to sit through that, I think, is what makes this work.
Was there anything in particular from the kind of the very small structure of the R&D process, so the kind of seminars, the workshops, that kind of thing, that helped? Or, if honestly there wasn't, that's also interesting.
The structure of the R&D, like the seminars and stuff, they were fun and they were engaging. and it was everything. Like it was everything all at once. And you sort of be like pivoting between music and this thing and that thing, and then culture, and then technical delivery, and you know, you're all sort of all over the place. And in the again, like I was saying earlier, it felt a little bit like chaos, and it made it occasionally tricky to work out what you're getting.
Yeah.
And again, like it's nice to be able to reflect on this now and be like, oh yeah, no, it was really good to have thought about that and sat down and thought about it. But in the moment of like that being something which supports the delivery of this project was, it's like this thing about averaging. Like there's a little bit of everything, so you just end up with a sort of average. And it would have been, again, the thing about expertise with experts and creative professionals is like, well, we already know what you know. You want to go and find out all the other stuff that you don't know. And to have a way of like teasing out those things with more or less weighting or priority could have been a different way, but that would have changed the feeling of it. So I don't know what anyone else thinks about that.
I really agree with your point about teasing out and patience. I mean, I'm very impatient, and I wanted to do that. Like, that's it, that's what we're doing. Can't someone just tell them that's what we're doing? And there were for a while, a lot of the more client-focused companies were saying, no one's actually given us the brief yet. And we're like, you are the brief, come on. And, you know, those different ways of working, it took a while to look, we all have to generate this together. And when we haven't got it, we've got to be patient and like keep testing the technology to see what it looks like, testing the audience to see how they feed back. And we had time to do that. And that's the first time I've ever worked in that way, with a longer development period, with a deadline, thank God. But actually, I think it was the audience that unlocked it for us. So the reading agency had convened these groups. They'd done a lot of research with the audience agency as well, who were fantastic. But, you know, we led these groups with maybe like, you know, sort of 9 passionate readers from the reading agency, people from all different walks of life, who would say, oh, I'm really excited about the idea of actually being able to see history there, where it happened, or, you know, will I really be able to do that and bring my kids in the library? But at one point, like this bit about the scanning, we were going to get people to bring objects and scan them and put them in the library, and they said, isn't it more interesting just to look at the real objects? And we're like, oh, okay, back to the drawing board. So that feedback process is incredibly important. As you say, the patience to wait and go, we haven't got that bit yet, it's not quite right yet. So that's what it gave us.
That's interesting, because I did want to touch on kind of experimentation, and you've talked a little bit there about how you experimented and tested beforehand. Angel, talk to me about when you're working on something that is this scale, when your expected audience is in the millions, when your budget is similar. How do you experiment and test in a way that feels like it's actually giving you kind of valuable feedback during a process like this?
I wish I could give you a better answer to that, other than that. The fact that it was something that was so big gave everyone, I think, a little bit more inspiration, right? Because it is so big, you can really dream big and test those ideas. And like I said earlier, nothing is wasted, nothing is, you know, like a silly idea. So yeah, I think that was something that was really brought out during the creative studio. And also, like, obviously everybody had totally different ideas, and instead of teasing those things out, I think it sort of brought the ideas together in a way that really made sense. And I don't know if it was obvious, but About Us wasn't actually it was brought to full fruition before the pitch. It was literally right up until the pitch when it was something that we were like, okay, yeah, this is what we're going to go ahead with. So it was a great help, yeah.
And what was the process like of kind of coming up with those ideas? How did you say yes and no to things as a group? You know, what went wrong? How did you know, okay, this isn't it?
So I think it was looking at everybody's key message and then looking about what that was, that how we could get that done and how we could get that done in a way that combines everybody else's key message as well. So it was obviously quite tricky, but in the end, very, very worth it. And it has changed a lot for me as an individual and for Stemettes as a whole, because STEM is all about solving ideas, right? Solving problems, coming up with ideas to these problems. And you can only do that through diversity, and then that's diversity of ideas, diversity of people, diversity of backgrounds. And I think that's really what Unboxed brought out, is that diversity, and that is the way forward.
I think that's really interesting, because one of the things that's very clear is, and of course, you know, optimistic was one of the original kind of brief words that were used to inspire these projects, but they did end up all being so optimistic. You know, they aimed to inspire, to engage. They all had very different messages, but nonetheless all messages of optimism and hope. You know, they wanted to go out and make change. And I'm interested to, Angela, I'll come to you, if you think that's partly due to this process of bringing people together in this way that felt very, you know, limitless, felt very open, you know, brought people together in a way that perhaps they've never worked together before.
Partly, but I think it was partly Unboxed's brief, you know, and setting the tone quite strongly that way. And the creative studio actually had a really big part in that, because, you know, I used to come away from that every day, even though it's like hard on Zoom for a long time, thinking, actually nobody's ever set me that brief before. And I think because we're, you know, as researchers, we're often in a critical space. TV, it's just downright cynical, you know, but you have an opportunity to do something you haven't done before, and you have to share it, and it's quite vulnerable to share that with audiences. You know, we were targeting what they call cultural cold spots, places where you don't often sort of have big cultural projects land, and to go through that process and go into those communities and see it being delivered in libraries was really enriching for me, because you see how much people just appreciated hearing stories told about themselves. And, you know, I think we would have liked to have done a really much fuller co-creation process with our creatives and the communities on the ground, but time is such a pressure. We did a lot of that work early on in listening, but we used our creatives as the cipher to connect with their communities, you know, in the production. But it is, I don't know, it was all very enriching, but when you get to the libraries and you see people really appreciating that, and you see the lights come on some kids' eyes, and it's like, oh, I didn't realize I could do that for a living. You know, that's really exciting, and I think that golden thread carried through from the creative studio right to delivery.
I have to say, my very first job was working in a library, so I loved your projects. I was so excited when I saw that's exactly it, when you saw people kind of go into that space and it be the beginning of a journey through their community, and that's always what I've thought libraries were, so I was so excited about that. Dev, I'll come to you. We're kind of reaching the end of our time. Do you think that you could have made the same work without the creative studio R&D process?
I think we could have made the same work, but it would have lacked this golden thread that you talk about. And to come back to an earlier question as well, it's like, how do you know? I think what we had to establish during during this R&D window is, what is the silvery thread of not even logic, but like feeling almost, that we are simultaneously chasing and that everything is hanging off of. And so to have not, I think that's the thing about, like, you know, blank page is almost the scariest thing, but it means that you've got loads of space to define all of those things, and it means that you can always then, during delivery, pivot back to, it's not even that, is it on brand, is it like, does it feel right? And we needed that space to redefine that. So, yes, but it would have been worse.
That's a good answer. I love it. And I also wanted to ask each of you, just as a final question, Dev, I'll start with you again. For you, what's kind of the key learning that you've taken away that you'd love to implement in your own personal process or in the industry that you work in?
Leave time. Leave time to have a blank page, I think. Because it's really easy to like get a brief in. You know, there's always a brief, right? You get a brief, you do the thing, and you need to deliver all the things. But like, just to leave time in the calendar and in the budget to just sit with it. I wish we could do that more.
Absolutely. Angela?
For me, I think the lesson has been that going forward, like, I would like that kind of creativity again, that creativity is about community and connection for me, and God, we needed it.
Fantastic. And Angel?
I think for me, it's to really hammer home that art and design can be a real job, especially with the whole idea that, you know, science, technology, engineering, maths are the real jobs, with like a proper job, right? That's what everyone says. But I think this project has really shown that art and design and creativity is an integral part of that and will be forever.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so, so much. As I said, these I think are three projects that really show off what Unboxed was about, what it did for communities, how it brought people together, how it created a truly interdisciplinary network that I think we'll all benefit from in the years to come. So do, again, check out these projects. Once again, they were About Us, StoryTrails, and Dreamachine. Go and look at what they did. It is absolutely spectacular. The work they did is truly life-changing, and I genuinely do not say that lightly. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed.